Our regular board meeting will be recorded and uploaded to our district website. The definitive documentation and decisions will be given in the meeting minutes approved at a later meeting. Any use of an electronic device such as a computer or cell phone by trustees is related to the business of the meeting. The core values that guide the work of the school division are respect, compassion, honesty, responsibility, and relationships. Our meeting decorum is expected to reflect these values. Public has the opportunity to ask questions pertinent to the agenda at number 18 on our agenda. I'd like to acknowledge that today's board meeting is being held within the traditional territory of the Dene Zaa and Treaty 8. And we are, because our auditor is sitting, waiting to do our financial presentation, we're going to move to agenda item number 3, and we'll come back to 2 after the auditor's presentation. So welcome, Corey. The floor is yours.
Okay, well, thank you very much for having me here tonight. And yeah, what I intend to do is take us through a review of the financial statements. And I've got them right here, so I'm going to share my screen. Great. So we have prepared a PowerPoint presentation to take us through the financial statements this year, as we've done in the past. And really the PowerPoint presentation is intended to be a reflection of the financial statements and essentially just a simplified view of the financial statements. However, this year I thought I would start just with the full set of financial statements because there's a few things included within the financial statements that haven't been there in past years, and I just want to make sure that everybody is aware of kind of where those items are coming from. And when we start on the statement of financial position, the first thing you'll notice is that the 2022 year does say restated, and this is a reflection of the fact that the accounting standards changed for the school district, and the school district was required to implement accounting for asset retirement obligations. So what you'll see on this statement of financial position this year, which wouldn't have been there in past years, is this $6.2 million liability. And this liability really reflects an estimate required for the liability to remediate any sites or physical assets that have asbestos or any contamination that needs to be legally remediated upon disposal. And this was implemented across all districts, school districts in the province this year as part of an update to the public sector accounting standards. So you will see that the statements do say restated. This is the appropriate language for the restatement. And then you'll also see some new notes. So I'm going to flip to them quite quickly and then take us on to that PowerPoint presentation. So the first brand new note that you would see would be this note that's essentially describing what I just said with respect to asset retirement obligation. So it describes when a liability is recognized, when there's a legal obligation to incur retirement costs in relation to a tangible capital asset. The other new parts that you'll see if you looked at the detailed financial statements would have been note 14, which I'm just going to take us to here. And note 14, oops, a bit too far. Oops. Note 14 got cut out, so on my version, but essentially reflects the change in the financial statements related to the asset retirement obligation. And then note 18 would just describe the prior period adjustment and the change in accounting policy related to that asset retirement obligation. So some new notes and disclosures within the financial statements, and I just wanted to highlight that those are brand new and that those are just a as part of the accounting implementation on that asset retirement obligation standard. So now I'll take us back into the usual presentation that I do. And again, this is essentially intended to facilitate our discussion on the financial statements and the review of the balances and activities for the year. So a quick agenda. So I'll talk about our auditor's report and then go through the financial statements and then just talk to some of the notes and take questions at the end of the presentation if there are some. So our auditor's report, so we do anticipate issuing a clean audit opinion. So the financial statements are the financial statements of the district. Once the board has approved the financial statements, then we do intend to issue a clean audit report. Our report is a compliance opinion, which essentially means that the financial statements are prepared in accordance with public sector accounting standards with some exceptions which are mandated through BC laws and applicable to all districts across the province. So essentially with oversight and with your relationship with an auditor, a clean audit opinion is what you are looking for. So getting into the assets of the school district. So essentially every year as of June 30th, 2023, this year, but every year as of June 30th, a line is drawn in the sand and we say, okay, what were all of the assets? What were all of the liabilities? And then how did the year look from a revenues and expenses perspective? So when we look down the assets, we can see that the cash balance has increased from $13.6 million to $15.6 million. And that increase was related to collection of some receivables. As you can see on the next line item, there was $1.7 million last year compared to $1.2 million. And then also there was just some general activities that would have increased the level of the cash balances. There's a small amount of inventories for resale. Those are consistent with the previous year. Prepaid expenses, which are services paid by the district, which will be rendered in future years. So there's an asset relating to those services of $329,000. And then supplies inventory. So those are supplies that the district will use in discharging its responsibility to provide education. And that's $71,000. And the last item, which we'll see more details on in the future pages, is $135 million, which is consistent with the previous year. And that relates to the physical assets of the school district. So all of the sites, the buildings, the furniture and equipment and computers that the school district owns. When we look at a breakdown of those receivables, so in the previous year, there were amounts owed from the province due to some First Nations as well. This year, really, the balance is largely from the ministry and then a balance of other receivables of just under $500,000. So $1.2 million of receivables at the end of the year. When we look at the tangible capital assets, so these are the physical assets, we can see largely there was just some addition to buildings work in progress, and on the buildings themselves, there was some decreases in the vehicles and the computer hardware, and then the total balance it increased by $3.8 million, but that was offset by the annual depreciation charge against those assets of just over $4 million. So overall, the total balance of tangible capital assets decreased by $153,000. When we look at the liabilities, so there's the accounts payable and accrued liabilities of $6.7 million compared to $6.4 million. Unearned revenue of $186,000 at the end of the year. Employee future benefits, which is an amount for post-retirement obligations and payouts to staff, and that's determined by an actuary of the school district, and that's $1.3 million compared to $1.1 million in the previous year, giving total liabilities of $8.2 million compared to $7.8 million in the previous year. There's also deferred revenue and deferred capital revenue. So the deferred revenues, those relate to programs for which there are significant restrictions. So these are funding programs where the program has yet to be delivered and they're carried forward into future years. So we can see that that balance did increase from $2.9 million in the previous year to $3.8 million in the current year. There's also deferred capital revenue, and the deferred capital revenue, this relates to funding that's received relating to capital assets. So it's held as a liability until the capital asset is depreciated, and that liability is brought into revenue at the same time as the depreciation cost. So the deferred capital revenue is intended to essentially normalize the results for the district year over year. So total deferred revenues were $112 million compared to $111 million in the previous year. Moving on from kind of the balances that the district had to the operations. So this has three columns. The column on the left would have been related to the budget for 2023. The column in the middle was the actual amounts that were received. And the column on the right relates to the actual results of 2022. So we can see that both revenues and expenses were in excess of both budget and the actual amounts from the previous year. So last year there was $86 million of revenues and $84 million of expenses. And in the current year, there were $92 million of revenue and $92 million of expenses. And largely the increases come from both funding and increased salaries expense due to some settlement of some of the negotiated agreements. This year, there was a deficit that was experienced of $357,000 compared to a surplus of just over $1 million in the previous year. When we look at the next page, we'll see how that deficit played out between the various activities and funds of the district. So when we look at the funds, so in the current year, there was a $137,000 surplus that was experienced by the operating fund. So the district is essentially, the operations are classified into capital operations and operating operations. So $137,000 from those operating operations, and the capital fund had a deficit of $493,000. So essentially the operations for the year were flat, and you can imagine $137,000 on over $90 million of revenue is essentially a break even. So overall, the accumulated surplus for the year decreased by that $356,000 that we saw on the previous page. So where does that leave the fund balances at the end of the year? It leaves the operating fund with a balance of $4.7 million, so an increase from $4.6 million in the previous year. And it moves the capital fund down to $21.3 million from $21.8 million in the previous year. So the total surplus on the financial statements is $26 million, largely made up of capital, and with a small portion of $4.7 million relating to the operations. So within the notes, so we flipped through them quite quickly previous to this, but all of the significant accounting policies and practices are disclosed in the notes to the financial statements, and they are quite lengthy. And I'm happy to take any questions at this point. I'll stop sharing my screen so I can make it a little bit bigger.
Questions? Comments?
It looks good. Angela, thank you for your tireless work on it. I know it was a hard year with all of the increases across every level.
Great. For second thought. Right. Thank you very much, Corey, for being with us tonight.
Yeah, great. Thanks for having me. And yeah, just echo the thanks to Angela and her team of getting through another audit season. I know it's it's always a lot of work, and there's a lot of questions that we ask, and we appreciate all the assistance from you and your team getting through this year.
I guess it wouldn't be an audit without all the questions.
No, it's hard to get through an audit with no questions. It wouldn't really be the same.
Very good.
Great. Thank you, and have a great night. Have a good rest of your meeting. If any questions come up, our contact information's in all of our reports, and feel free to reach out.
Thanks, Gordon. Thanks, Gordon.
Thanks.
Great. Thank you.
We're going to go back to item number 2, additions to the agenda and acceptance of the agenda. Can I have a mover and a seconder for the agenda? Moved by Bill, seconded by Thomas. Are there any additions to this agenda? Tonight at this point. Calling the question then, all in favor? As presented is carried. We're going to move on to item 4.0, and you might notice that there's a heading change there from trustee celebrations to trustee engagement, because at the agenda setting meeting, we talked about the fact that sometimes things that we attend on behalf of the board as trustees may not fit under the celebration category, and the purpose we felt of 4.0 was to show what people as trustees are involved in within the community. So we changed that up a little bit. So we'll start with Trustee Campbell.
At the start of a new year, I've contacted my schools, and I'm purposely trying not to go into a school in September because it's so busy. But I have contacted all of my schools and let them know that I have seen the open houses for next month and I will be attending.
Trustee Gillis.
Yeah, start of school, there's a barbecue I'll be attending this week with the Welcome Back Barbecue in Hudson's Hope, and I did attend a meeting last week with some community members as well as our early learning principal, Tracy, regarding the current childcare crisis in Hudson's Hope, which, if you don't know, is we had one licensed facility and one unlicensed daycare for about 17 years she was in. And she got shut down this summer for being unlicensed and decided to move. And then the licensed facility also shut down. So we currently have 0 daycare in Hudson's Hope, which makes it impossible to grow or live. You know, luckily my kids, yeah, so something has to be done.
Well, our titles changed, so
Yeah.
you can talk further about that. Vice Chair Newman.
We started the year in August with a strategic planning, I don't know, was it called Overlook, whatever, with Rick Price? At the end of that, I thought that was a really good startup to give us the understanding. And then we had another strategic planning meeting with the Wind Systems I attended. And being the rep for Clearview had an interesting startup. There's been lots of communication going back and forth, and parents are reaching out, which is good. I hope to be able to be directed to the right places, so good.
And Trustee Scott Moncrief isn't here at the moment, but he plans to join us, so we'll maybe go back and give him an opportunity for this. Trustee Snow.
All right. Since our last meeting, which was a while ago, so that includes grad, and then which went really well. And then that night, I quite often do the celebration that night. So that was one of my things again. And then come August, I did the Pro-D. That week, I was told that I was appointed to an inclusion committee for the province. So I'm looking forward to some meetings for that. And yeah, just gonna be a busy month or two. I got a provincial council meeting, a BCPC meeting, and a few others. I did avoid my schools for the first week, went back and visited them after that. Everything was going pretty good. I did go the day before school started. One of my schools lost 2 teachers the day before school. So I went over and brought principal a little treat. Calmed them down. But no, I mean, everything's going well. You know, you just go with what you have, and everybody's working together.
Trustee Witt.
Yeah, it's been a busy 2 months for sure. Breakfast at Ecole Central. I saw our lovely chair there. It was just a great way to kind of get everybody together. Had some delicious bacon and pancakes. And, we'll be going to some of the open houses coming up here shortly, both for my children and hopefully for the schools that I represent as well. Was at the block party this past month, a couple of weeks ago. It was fantastic. RCMP building grand opening was really good. It was nice to see some of the faces again. I had 3 birthdays on a personal note, all in the same month, so in June, so busy. And I'm looking forward to the BCPC meeting in November. It's coming up.
Thank you very much. So on behalf of the board, I attended both the North Peace graduation and the Hudson's Hope graduation. I was quite impressed at the North Peace graduation with the fact that many of our graduates had chosen to wear their Métis sash, and graduation tassels for Indigenous students were different. They had a feather and students had a choice about that. So I thought about Blueberry's local enhancement agreement that really talked about wanting to prepare their students to walk in 2 worlds. And that was just kind of a nice recognition that their students are walking in 2 worlds. So very tastefully done. I've attended 3 meetings of the Good Neighbors group, and I will report out at committee of the whole meeting with regarding that. Strategic planning with Rick Price. I also, throughout the summer, have been working on planning committees for the joint NIB Northwest Interior meeting coming up in October. Right at the tail end of the school year, I was asked to chair the Rural and Remote Networking Group for the BCSTA. We have had 2 meetings of that to date. We're still going back and forth between this group and the board of directors on exactly what the terms of reference will be. It's a networking group, so it's different than a working group, and it's a 3-year commitment to this particular group. Once those terms of reference are out of draft, I'll bring them back. I'll bring them back to the committee of the whole, so any heads can help me figure out how we're going to do this work. Bill, I have to give a big thanks to for attending the new teacher orientation. It was due to my error. I planned to attend a day late, and Bill was there, and I want to thank him very much for covering for me. Yeah. So, and I've had a meeting with Stephen regarding our board work plan for 2023-24, and we'll bring that back and talk about that at the committee of the whole, because some of the things that we talked about wanting to see for this year, we need to figure out if we've hit the mark with some of the things we talked about, or if there's future work to be done there. And I have touched base with the schools that I'm liaison for, and I got to eat breakfast at Central on Friday, and I got to look at other nice bulletin boards and doors and things like that and get that feel for the start of the school year, which I love. So. All right. Moving on to item number 5, our minutes of our regular board meeting of June 19th, which seems like a long time ago, but it's pages. Pardon?
There's, the motion is attached to 3.
Oh, okay, sorry. We do have to go back. I got excited and ahead of myself. We're going to go back to 3.1, and I need a motion that the Board of Education approves the 2022-2023 financial statement and auditor's report. Moved by Madeline, seconded by Ida. All right, Thank you, Angela. Right,
And then we'll call it a question.
call the question, yeah. Calling the question now, all in favor? Sometimes I think the job is done when I have a mover and seconder. It keeps doing it. Now, June, pages 6 to 14 in your agenda package. Could I have a mover and a seconder for those minutes? Moved by Bill, seconded by Madeline. Any errors or omissions in those minutes? Thomas?
So going to page 15, talking about fentanyl strips. I wasn't actually asking about the fentanyl strips at that point. I remember reading over this after. I was asking about fentanyl testing
Fentanyl testing.
equipment that actually tested the levels of fentanyl within the drugs, not just the strips.
Not this
The
one.
strips are regularly out there already, as is.
And I think he talked about a machine and if they could get it, somebody to run it.
That was the question, yeah.
All right. Calling the question now, all in favor? Business arising from the minutes, I'm looking at the action items that were within the minutes, and I believe that they've all been taken care of or addressed. I know the snapshot got done. I talked to Dr. Young about the kindergarten screening, and it's still not, there's not information back on that yet. So. See any other business arising? So 5.2 is done. Moving on to agenda item number 6, approval of the excerpts of the regular board meeting of May the 23rd, which is page 15 in your agenda package. Please get a mover and seconder. Moved by Bill. Thomas. Any errors or omissions?
I just realized the error or omission was relating to page 15, so my apologies, it's actually on this one.
Okay, that's fine. I know where it is. We'll fix that. All right. Calling the question then, all in favor? Carried. Moving on to announcements and reminders. Welcome, David. Give a minute to get yourself organized. Leah, I'm wondering if in the announcements and reminders where we have put down things like the soccer tournament and the volleyball tournament, if we can put the word elementary in there so that we're noting that those are events for that particular audience.
On the far right, the schools, it says, I'm assuming the schools are organizing.
Yes.
Could we put somewhere at the school where it's being held? I'm assuming it's not being held at Central and Presbyterian.
No.
No, and in addition to this, we've sent that out. But we
To
will,
us.
yeah, we will.
It did, the schedule for elementary sports committee did come out to us, but what you're asking is if the public is interested in knowing where those events are, it would be nice to have the event location in the announcements and reminders.
So if I can then suggest maybe, Leah, that it would be something like elementary soccer tournament and then in brackets, the school where it's held, something like that. Would that work?
Yeah, I think that would work.
Thank you.
Are there any additions to this lovely long list of exciting things coming up in our district? I'm going to pass around Sharon's chart for SUPAC meeting attendance by trustees, and you'll note that we have September's meeting covered. Madeline and I will be at that one, but you'll see that we don't have any names down beside the October meeting, so if people could sign up, we'll get that back to Sharon.
And Bill, you're able to attend the provincial council meeting?
Yeah, already booked to go. Yep.
Anything else related to that?
Do you know if the Truth and Reconciliation Day, is there some consistency around that? Is it going to be the first Monday of October every month, or where are we at? Every year, sorry.
October 30th, isn't it?
Well, no, this year it's October 2nd, but like that just came out of that got announced, what, in August?
It's actually the 30th, but it's the second because it's on the weekend.
Oh, so it's always going to be the 30th,
Yeah,
and then Stat and Lou would be the 2nd?
The stat and Lou would always fall on whatever day that is.
The following Monday.
The Friday
Oh,
and the
okay.
Monday. We went aligned with the other sector partners.
Okay,
The other
so the
unions.
Truth and Reconciliation Day is always going to be September 30th?
Well,
Okay,
the stat holiday won't always be, like, some years might fall on a Friday.
but it's September 30th.
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
And there is events happening at the Northern Lights College if anybody is interested.
and if,
On the day.
in starting
On the
to
day.
look at school calendars, some are looking at their Orange Shirt Day and Truth and Reconciliation activities before that day. Some are doing it after. There's variety going on within the district if you want to find a school and connect
Yeah.
at a point that works for you. Next. Moving on to our minor capital plan attachment. Has it been submitted?
No.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, so, thank you. We are asking for 6 buses this year. 3 of them are replacements and 3 new buses, as we used to contract busing services, and now we are asking, we're bringing it in-house, so we no longer have busing contractors, so we need buses to replace those because we're using our spares and that leaves us with no spares. So we're asking for 6 buses. The replacements are in need of replacement. The roads definitely our buses take maybe more abuse than those down south that are on nice highways and things. So the ministry has different components of replacement, but they seem to work with us as a rural district on replacing them. And then we have 3 projects. Last year, if you remember, we did the first part of the Hudson Hope HVAC system. The total project is 1.8 million. So last year, 2023-24, we received 800,000. So we're working with that right now. And then for 24-25, we're asking for the additional $1 million. So the boilers have been purchased. Now we have to do something with them, so we have to install them. So, and then hopefully everyone knows by now that we're building a gym out at Upper Halfway, and we're requesting 85,000 to do the exterior of the school to match the gymnasium. And so that 85,000 will take care of that, and it will also provide some additional protection that was not in place back when it was originally constructed, so it'll make it more eco-friendly. And then the third one, this is a new component for the minor capital, is the food infrastructure. So we're just North Peace cafeteria. We're looking to change the flooring out in there and just change do the cafeteria flooring and the food storage and new countertops in the food education area, so we can have some potential food education in the future. Those are my asks for 24-25 year.
When you go to Hudson Hope School, it opened in 1994, and we did have an HVAC system in it. We didn't wait till 1996 to get one, so I might want to correct the date on that. I laughed when I saw that. And I guess I had another question related to North Peace, because we've heard at our SUPAC meetings and DPAC meetings that there's a concern with what food choices we can offer at North Peace because of the date of the equipment and aging of the actual equipment within the food services area.
Okay.
And this seems to be things other than that we're spending money on at North Peace. So I just wondered, because that food infrastructure funding, I understand, probably would allow us to purchase equipment to be able to make meals, wouldn't it?
It would. So we currently are contracting out the cafeteria, like
Okay,
the
all right.
in-house portion, so we can't do
Okay,
that.
I get
We
it.
do the outside, the flooring.
I got it. Okay, I got it. Any other questions?
Sorry, and just this infrastructure program is 2 years, so we can ask for this year and then potentially see what happens next year. So.
Two questions. So the busing contractors, explain that to me. They own their own bus and then you just paid them a contract rate? Is that how it
Yes.
works? And we want to get away, worked. It worked.
That's how it works.
That's how it did work. And we wanted to get away from that, or they quit?
We brought it in-house just to be consistent.
Okay. And you're confident you'll get the replacements, or would you have to go back? If we don't, will you have to go back out to contracting it?
We have buses, those routes are running right now. We just have been using our backup buses, and as we know, buses break down, so then I've kind of stressed out our transportation manager by skimming from her inventory, so.
And then the second question about Hudson Soap HVAC. This is an operation, and maybe you don't know the answer, but is it true that heat and cooling and everything for Hudson Soap School is controlled by, no, somewhere here?
They can adjust the temperatures here for the HVAC system.
So what has to happen in Hudson Soap? Somebody has to call here and say, adjust our temperature?
They can adjust. Actually, I'm gonna plead the fifth on that one. I'm not too sure. I know we can we do control the school's temperatures centrally through facilities. But now that I think about Hudson Hope, that's why we're replacing it, is because the system's old, and I don't think it has that option available to it. But in town, we definitely can do it. But can I get back to
Yeah, because I hear the concern commonly, because our temperature is just different in Hudson. We're often warmer,
Okay.
and there's always, you're always cold in the school or hot in the school, and then somebody says, well, if you can believe it, you ain't got a conference, and I don't know, I just hear that nobody can just go turn, so I'm just wondering if that's because it's old and that's going to get fixed, or if there was a good reason for it, or you probably know.
Well, we could do some variation on temperature, but
There. Yeah.
But there's been a lot of changes to control systems since '94. So
It seems
there
to me
is
like
that
schools
curve.
should be able to control their own heat, but perhaps not.
Thomas, then Bill.
Tell you later.
So I'm just looking at the total funding requested, and just reading over, I'm looking at line 26 on the actual sheet, but number 3 on yours. And it's the bus that has the new engine in it, over $55,000. So if it's a new engine, then it really has 0 kilometers on it, or right now it has 364,000 kilometers on it, since they put in the new $55,000 engine.
Yeah, the engine is, I believe we got the engine in April, so definitely does not have 346,000, but the bus structure has 346,000, so they replaced the engine, and I don't think they're seeing the results that they want.
So they need a new bus now for $250,000. I'm just trying to understand what the,
It's not just the engine that, like, usually, like, this one was a big one that the engine went out. It's usually the components, like the struts and I'm not very mechanically.
Keep going, you're doing great.
Thank you.
Transmission,
Thank
rear
you.
end.
That's what usually wears out because of the rough roads. So I believe with this particular bus, she's brought it more like to the softer roads, the more not so rural routes, to kind of save its livelihood. But I think the structure of it is wearing out. So yes, we did put an engine in it, but
I was going to say, in preparing the stuff for the financial standing committee, some of the parts on our buses last year were up 35% from the year before, and that's before you look at installation, so
Like everything.
transportation is.
and the concern might be that this bus with its $55,000 engine will be kind of recruits kept on board as a spare.
okay, I was just looking at the other ones that are $190,000 for a new bus. Correct me if I'm wrong, but we're spending $250,000 on the existing.
We're not spending it on the existing, that's the cost of the replacement. So it could be a larger bus
Be a
than
larger bus.
the 3 below.
Oh, okay, so it is a
That's
larger
the
bus.
cost of replacing it.
Okay, perfect.
Bill?
The bus drivers, the contractor ones, did we hire them on? Did I understand that? Now, were their buses worth taking on also?
Well, the difference is that the ministry funds this, and I would have to find that out of operating or surplus.
The ministry won't.
The ministry won't.
Like use buses.
If they got a 2-year-old bus or something sitting there, I mean,
Contractor.
yeah, I mean, just,
So
it'd be a
just,
2-year-old bus sitting here instead of sitting in Illinois or somewhere.
at one time, Bill, we had a lot of busing contracts. And as a board, we decided to try to get away from contract busing. And we didn't buy any of their buses either. Yeah, we replaced some of the drivers came to work for us, but we didn't buy their bus.
I'm just thinking with all the difficulties getting buses now, if somebody had a newer bus, it would make sense, because, I mean, we're waiting a year for a bus, or more.
Or maybe, more than a year.
So were we able to pick up any drivers?
The drivers. Okay.
So that was one of my questions, actually, I've written down here. Do we have enough drivers for all the routes right now?
We do, we're working on spare drivers right now.
Awesome. And then, can I continue? Did we end up filling the trade positions, the mechanic and the carpenter?
We can talk further, there's places for staffing. Because right now, I need a motion from someone that we approve the minor capital plan for 24-25 as presented. Moved by Bill, seconded by David. Following the question, all in favor? We've had the discussion. All right, moving on to senior staff reports, and we'll start with our superintendent's report.
Thanks, Ellen. A number of items here, but I'll touch briefly on them. First of all, item number 1 is human resources summary as per usual. Item number 2 is a letter explaining some of the incentives that were allocated this past summer, and I worked with the ministry and BCPC on facilitating that process, and I'll let the questions kind of drive that topic when we come back to it. So that's for your information. My online superintendent's report under our framework, and just reminding people that this is under strategic goal number 1 of delivery of excellent educational programming focused on student outcomes, which drives our framework goals. The first area here to show is a slide deck that we had from our presenter from the Ministry of Education last Tuesday, Anna Ver, as just part of our sort of focus on numeracy and ensuring that all our leaders have a good understanding of all the components of the numeracy curriculum and how they're being facilitated and supported in schools. It was good to hear that the ministry is working with groups of teachers around the province, specifically on numeracy, which has been a challenge across the province, in this project called Learning Pathways. And they're building up a repertoire of example units, of lessons, of structures, of planning that can really help the teacher ensure that their planning is based off of the curriculum. So that was helpful. Under Human and Social Development, just ongoing workshops. The Learning Services Department here is organizing many of them. One of them in terms of Human and Social Development is around a workshop designed for EAs and ISSWs around the functions of behavior. So that's being offered. Also, there was a question here previously around the Accessible British Columbia Act. So there's an update here for trustees and the public around some initial compliance pieces. We formed a committee, and the good news is we did that in cooperation with some other northern districts to make sure we had a committee to get this started. This will be a long, many years process to inquiring as to how accessible our community is, how accessible our buildings and our district is. And so that's we fulfilled that obligation and kicked off that process in SD60. Under careers and skill development, my apologies for the size, it was just to show that all the schools are now signing up for the various district challenges. I will make sure that trustees and the public are aware of those competitions closer to the date, organized by our careers department. Also under careers and skill development is a report came out in July, and just in terms of some information related to Camp Cameron, providing that for you. Under operations and human resources, really pleased with bit of a delay in getting started, but we moved affordable from central out to 1-to-1 as per the board's direction to start up a middle school program at 1-to-1. So we're excited about that, and the technology and facilities have been working hard together to prepare this portable, which will have a blend of some online learning along with some in-person teacher facilitation for their electives and those kinds of things. So this is going to take some time to get things rolling, but we're excited about the possibilities.
Stephen, actually, no, sorry, go ahead.
That's okay, we'll come back. No problem, Thomas. Additional examples of some professional development opportunities through learning services, including one for the provincial outreach program for the early years. We're one of the pilots in the province for offering some professional development with a specific focus group on early literacy. Under Truth and Reconciliation, just a slide to show you the sort of the many resources that our schools and our leaders are referring to. This slide was shown to all the leaders at our latest meeting, where they can click on links and find resources to help plan for, and it's not just a one-day thing, it's an all year, the commitment around Truth and Reconciliation, but a specific focus on the Orange Shirt Day and all the activities leading up to our Truth and Reconciliation Day. Similarly, some of the information that's been shared with all of our schools from across Canada and resources that can be drawn from to make it successful, both event and practice. Finally, under Take 3, Margaret Montmarie, I think I mentioned, trustees came to the school board office and conducted a mock board meeting, so I think we had more fun than the kids. They did pass some motions, including that school would now be offered in the summer, much to the chagrin of our teaching staff that was there. So we did not follow through on that motion, but we had a lot of fun. Ann Roberts Young, every year since they started, I guess, they've had a scavenger hunt, and students given a list of 18 activities to complete, so it looks like they had a great time in doing that. And all of the schools were kicking off the year with breakfasts, with activities, and in that line you can see with the last picture, all the kids at Burt Bowes Middle School received a t-shirt in their sort of team color, and then they organized a school photo. The great thing is that it was our plant superintendent, Chad Cushway, who has abilities with drones and got the drone up there, took some pictures and some video footage. So it was also a great start for Burt Bowes. Item number 2 is we'll be asking this to be broken out for a motion to pass. Essentially what you have, trustees, is 2 versions. Our full version that senior staff work with on a daily basis, our framework, and then you'll notice it's kind of a standard template that it basically report the same information to the ministry, but in a format that they've approved. So it's basically one framework, 2 different versions, and I'll be asking the board to pass that tonight. Item number 3, I committed to, and there were questions around bringing back the environmental scan that was submitted in July. So the time to submit that was in July, so bringing that back to the trustees in terms of the information that was provided to the ministry. Item 4, just sharing with you the slides that we get in the summer from the Ministry of Education, which kind of outlines the broad strokes of what they see as their priorities, what their teams are working on, and so I'm pleased to provide that each year to trustees. Item number 5 is to just give you a sense of some of those big rocks and things that we worked on together as a leadership team over 2 days in the summer with all our principals and vice principals. We had a really good advance, we call it, over at Ann Roberts Young. Item number 6, pleased to announce that, and we discussed this before as a board, and in fact, I think I remember questions around, hey, how are we going to get new people to come into leadership and into administration, because we definitely anticipate some relatively immediate need starting next year. So we have a structure and a program designed for Leadership Academy. We already have several applications that have come in. We'll work with a cohort of 15 district leaders, and it's really a great chance for us to get to know them, for them to get to know us, and to go through some of those priority values and practices for leadership. Item number 7, we will be being in contact with the compliance branch, and the auditor is pleased to come up and offer some workshops. So we have basically planned for 3 workshops, 1 for general K-12 for all our principals and vice principals, 1 for secondary specifically, and then 1 workshop around our online programs. And so we're looking forward to, and this is a project that happens around the province, and so there will be a slight cost associated with it. It's not exorbitant, and it'll be good just to bring everyone up to speed in our leadership group as to what constitutes the elements of an audit. Item number 8, 9, and 10 will be pulled out, please, for passing for a separate motion. The item number 8 is out of district field trips. Item number 9 is community coaches, and item number 10 is the postal responsibility. That is my report for your consideration.
Right. And I have a mover and a seconder for Stephen's report, and we'll go through item by item for discussion. Thomas and David. Right, we'll start in Stephen's report with the staffing presentation of the information which is found on page 16 of your agenda packet. Bill?
Couple questions that I don't expect answers for right now, just because you put the numbers with you. But TOCs, just wondering how we're doing there, numbers wise, and a breakdown of certified, not certified.
I have that information.
No!
I was asking Wade the other day, and so we're at about 50 and 50 approximately.
100 total.
Yeah. Now, that sounds like a lot, but it's not, because a lot of people are not available at certain times.
Yeah.
Our HR staff is confirming the availability of everyone that's annually on those lists, and happy to come back at different times throughout the year with the exact number, but we were sitting at about 50 and 50. Which, in context, we need more.
Yeah, I mean, how many more?
Gosh, another 50.
50 nice.
Would be good, to be
If
honest.
you run an event and you pull in a grade group for all your learning assistants, you're looking at pulling in a minimum of 30.
We're still not able to get back to, maybe we never will, to the days when we were doing significant amounts of Pro-D during the day.
And out of 100, I'm guessing 5 of them are like Presbyterian.
Yeah, some of them would be location
Yeah.
specific, you're correct,
Exactly.
which means they're not available elsewhere, and many of them, because it's a supply and demand thing, will make themselves available or not available throughout the year.
And the other one, of course, is letters of permission.
Yes. We are aiming, I have that answer too. So we were at about 28 last year. That includes part-time. We were heading towards about 14 right now, Bill. And so about half the number of last year. It's still a lot, and we may still need 1 or 2 more, but we're sitting at about half the number of LPs as last year. And overall, we were sitting at about half the number of unfilled positions to start the year. So still in need, but less desperate than we were last year.
And the other thing is, I've had the question a few times, and I know we've talked about it, with that $10,000 bonus a teacher can get.
Yes.
Just a list of what, constitutes them getting the bonus for that
Can we
position.
come to that under item number 2?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thomas and Nicole?
What was the big change this year? Like, I mean, that's a significant decrease, and that's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, when, at the end of August last year, we were still sitting at about probably 7 or 8 unfilled full-time classroom positions. So this year, we ended up being about 3 or 4. So while there's been improvement, at about half, there's still a need there, but to Bill's point, we did see that the incentives that were put out there made a difference, as well as we partnered with Indeed, that Canada-wide organization around recruiting, paid a fee to have very strategic and specific recruiting meetings with our district only, and applicants who would be interested in coming here. That got us some traction and some applicants that we hadn't had in the past. As well as our HR people were working throughout the summer, recruiting, calling people from previous career fairs, following up on those. And so we just continue to build up the capacity, if you will.
Stephen, I always pull up this list, and I'm assuming if they're still on here, that they're still vacant.
Not necessarily.
There's like 18 positions there.
Yeah. So
Now,
when I
one
say-
of them is a .173 or something kind of thing, but.
Yeah. So Bill, it's really important to distinguish between the full-time classroom enrolling positions
Yeah.
and these ongoing part-time pieces that actually will come and go throughout the year, as you know, depending on the enrollment changes or on prep teachers or on medical leaves and all that kind of stuff. So we've always been able to cover those part-time pieces, either internally or through TOC coverage, but it's the enrolling full-time classroom positions that we've got to have someone in front of the kids.
That's the catch. We covered them with TOC. and then we
Yeah.
take away the DOC list.
Yeah, and told they're filled, and they usually are covered, those part-time pieces.
Yeah.
Internally, once the dust has settled here, Bill, around who's taking what positions. But it still reflects a need. I'm not here saying that
Oh,
we
yeah.
have
Oh,
no
no,
need anymore.
Compared to the last couple of years, we're starting better.
What's interesting, Fort Nelson has no letters of permission. They're trying to figure out how that happened, but they have no letters of permission this year.
I will say better. I won't say we're doing great, but we're definitely
There's
doing
no
better.
question that from HR's perspective and from our leaders' perspective, we're doing better.
Yeah.
We like good news.
Pass on to them.
Yeah, I certainly will.
So, Nicole,
So, because you have all the answers.
No pressure now.
Out of the 14 LOPs, do you have any idea, I'm wondering if they are, unfortunately, are the rural remote areas hit hardest?
That's a good question, and I'm rather than guess, I'll bring that back to you, Nicole, and to the people. And what I will say from last week is that it was spread across geography and grades and topics. So in the past, it used to be, we knew we had one at Prescott for the shop. We still have that one.
Yeah.
But we then had LOPs working in town, as we do this year, as well as an LOP out at Baldano last year. So I'll say from last year that it was actually spread across the geography, but I'm gonna get back to you on the exact place.
And we have middle, Kearney.
Because I,
Yeah, middle school had LOPs, the high school had LOPs, and so.
several, like, I think there's 5 of those
Yeah.
14 just in Hudson Hope.
Yeah, and so this is not limited
No.
to just your rural schools.
So while there is some good news, you guys,
Yeah.
there are some schools really suffering.
Yeah.
In fact, the whole town. Yes.
Well, they should have elected you.
I'll give that to Stephen after I control myself. Moving on to the recruitment and retention update, and I'm just wondering if you can explain the difference between Tier 1 and Tier 2 incentives before I open it to questions.
Yes, thank you. So the way that this was very quickly designed, if I can emphasize that, because all of this came out in June, at the end of June, where the ministry and BCPC, the ministry provided money, BCPC had to come up with a structure to allocate incentives across the districts that needed it. So within 2 or 3 meetings, this entire process was put together. I say that because they have now this year to come up with some better parameters, some better explanations of the process and those kinds of things. Tier 1 and Tier 2 at the time was a distinction between $10,000 and $5,000. It was, and so Helen, it sometimes depended on what the application of the district entailed and what they were asking for. Most of the allocations were for incentives of $10,000 attached to each posting when they were given.
And so the number of Tier 1 incentives, Southeast Kootenai got 2 for Elkford.
Yes.
And that's how we read that.
And that's right. And if it was Tier 2, I think, Helen, it was 5,000 and Tier 1 was 10,000.
But that's the number that. it's the
Yes, that's the number they got, correct. SD 60 got 5 Tier 1 incentives, 50,000, which represents 10% of the overall allocation of $500,000. So we got a needed but disproportionate amount of the allocation.
There's still one that's posted.
Yes, and it's great because if one did get hired, let's say by an LOP, we then had to take that incentive and apply it to a different position, which was still needed. We still have one attached to 1-to-1. We still have one attached to Hudson's Hope, and so it was helpful.
And you will send us out the listing of the criteria for the incentives.
So that's why I included this information here. I can maybe send you an example of the application form. Are you asking, sorry, Bill, how does the district qualify to get it?
Yeah, no, I don't know if I've seen that sheet. That's why.
Yeah, it's in part of the agenda package.
It is, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't see it.
It just says how many we got, how many schools, but I think what you're asking is how does a teacher get it? You just,
No, what's the breakdown?
Criteria?
Like, there's a have to be empty for so long? Does it have to be a rural area? Does it
Great
have to
question.
be-
So again, it was, and I
Like,
was
there
part of
one-
this,
There was one at Robert Ogilvy,
right?
and I was going like, it's in the middle of town.
Yeah.
Like, so I mean, why there?
So the BCPC and the ministry didn't determine exactly how the districts or which positions, but each application did outline the rural schools, the toughest situations that we've been unable to hire chronically. So the criteria were, has this been chronic shortages in this particular school? Does it represent a community that is underserved? Are there priority populations involved? How rural is rural? Is it, there were some cities that were located along the #1 highway. We didn't necessarily consider that rural. We had applications from districts in Metro. We disregarded them. And so the criteria was chronic shortages, risk of programming or school closures, and basically underserved populations was the lens we had as we went through them. Once we got the allocations, we applied those here to Hudson's Hope, 101, Upper Halfway, those kinds of things. But as some people got hired, we were able to move those if they didn't qualify. So let's say a letter of permission was hired, we're not allowed to use the incentive for a person hired on a letter of permission. Make sense? So then we were able to move that incentive to another certified teacher position.
It had to be somebody from out of, was it district or province?
Pardon me?
They had to be from out of, they couldn't be from here, right?
No, they could be from anywhere as long as they're a certified teacher.
But new hire.
A new hire, sorry, new hire, yeah.
So like a brand new graduate from here would get it? Could get it?
No, it could be someone who's brand new to the district from a different province, for
But
example.
locally, some new local graduate. saying
Yeah, they would, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Anyone who's certified could be eligible for the incentive.
And the way I sort of looked at it is in order to apply for the incentives, you had to list the priority areas
Yes.
within the district.
Yeah.
You listed the priority areas, but you're allowed to shift. You can't
There was some,
just.
fortunately, there was some flexibility. And
Yeah.
again, this is one of the things, what did we learn from all of this? Is that we need some flexibility in it. And I expect, Bill, that there will be a bit more robust structure to how this all will work next year.
It's just back in the spring, this all was a different scenario with
Yeah.
some other districts coming in.
So, and we were, it was very rushed.
Yeah.
But as the North and as your colleagues and other trustees said, we still want this to roll out now. And so we had to go with the flow.
Thank you, Stuart.
Yeah, you betcha.
A lot of work, and the work continued over the summer on that.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. All right, moving on to this report.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
We'll start by looking at the framework for enhancing student learning. Do you have any questions or comments related to that?
Are we going to the superintendent's report or not?
Yep, and that's the first thing on it is the framework for enhancing learning.
Well, this is my online report, and then we're
Yeah.
gonna break out
And then
the,
we'll break out a motion for it, but
this is an update from me, yeah.
Just a question on this report. You had you said you did the Montgomery School mock board meeting?
Yeah.
Was that for Montgomery? So how did that get initiated? That was just a teacher that
Yeah.
came to you? Okay.
Yeah.
So that was elementary kids?
It was driven entirely by a kindergarten teacher.
No way.
it was kind of payback for the beautiful mural that got pasted
Yeah.
up in the front hallway.
Yeah, so he reached out and we were happy to accommodate. So,
I enjoyed sitting in the corner.
yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Thomas.
So first, just a question.
Yeah.
Does 101 have fiber? Like, do they have actual internet out there, or is this another Starlink facility?
It's a link facility.
And it's working out well?
Yeah.
Awesome. Glad to hear that.
Good question, I'm glad.
Let's go back to the top. Let's keep on target.
You betcha.
So we can discuss Fessel further when we go
Yeah,
down,
yeah,
because we have a separate motion for that.
Yeah.
I did spend a day in Cameron Lake in June, I went out to join a class, and I must say, once Loren recognized me, I heard all day long about everything that you knew at Cameron Lake. Kind of changed the focus of my body, but it was nice to be there.
Hats in the shade. Either a hat, pair of shades.
Yeah. So it's exciting to have this happening at 101 for now, for sure. Okay.
Yeah, I have a comment about truth and reconciliation. I had an opportunity this summer to go on holidays with 3 of my grandparents. And I want to give a shout out to the education system because we went to 3 Indigenous museums. And my grandkids are in grade 8, grade 3, and grade 4. And the questions they asked and the knowledge they knew was incredible. Like, it amazed me. And the questions, like, they went to elders and talked to the elders and were very good. And I just thought, I was so impressed with the knowledge that they've learned. And it's obvious they've learned it through school. So I just want to give a shout out to our staff for that.
I had a question related to some of the summer pro D. Is our uptake on that the same? Because people might not have felt like they had a summer this summer with the smoke and everything else. It was a really nice
Good
weekend.
question. They were completely full.
On this topic, we actually have a local writer with a new book out. Helen Knott is releasing her Becoming a Matriarch on September 21st over at Northern Lights College is her book.
And Carlene is going down to the Writers' Festival where she's presenting. Yeah, it's very cool. And so I am asking for item 2 to be broken out for approval.
Yes. Right. So we have a motion for Stephen's whole report, and then we have some full motions. So let's go first of all to number 2, the district framework for enhancing student learning. And are there any questions, comments related to the framework?
I think I have one, I'm just pulling it up, but it's a bit slow here. So that big, long document, that's the internal one that you're kind of working on, that has all the data and the...
They both have all the data. It's just the format of the ministry is a little confusing, Madeline, because one section of it counts for the 10 pages and the rest of it doesn't. So the ministry one is that the one that starts with, is it the second document in
It's the
here?
second document.
It's the second document, and as you'll kind of notice,
That's the ministry one.
it's a ministry
That's the
one,
ministry one, right?
and it's the same information but presented in the format that they'll accept, the template.
Stephen, can objective 1.4, which is to increase successful transitions in grades 6 to 10, when I looked at what our key strategies were, I didn't see strategies that seemed to me to be specific to that transition from rural schools to urban schools. And I know we know that the 101 to Burtgo's transition wasn't successful. That's why we've just put something in at 101. I didn't know what was happening with the students from Cleary that were coming in, or Upper Pine, because they're not mentioned here, and we do transitions in grades different for those schools.
Yes. No, thanks for that. It's something we'll bring back to the team as well. And even if something is not in this document, it doesn't mean it's not being done. And in fact, if anything, we do try and pare down the number of areas that we focus on, and so that. But I do know, for example, even with the Clearview students, for example, they bring in only the grade 10s to the high school into the ELC on the first day. But it's definitely something I'll bring back, but there are transition activities happening, but not necessarily to the degree that you read here.
Well, no.
One of
And
the
actually on that topic, I was gonna ask, because when we were talking grad rate, I was just quickly in my head, from the ones that I know, happen to know, because we have 4 kids out at Clearview, and when I think about the graduation percentage, when I ask our kids, how many actually graduated from your class? Out of a class of 12 and 3 don't, that's a pretty big percentage that doesn't. And that gets lost in that transition.
Yeah, it's a great point to include here.
And then the other thing I already sort of mentioned under goal 5,
Yes.
objective 5.1, connect with the community on future needs. This implies when we put it there for early learning and childhood, that we have one community. And as Nicole's attested to, Hudson Hope has childcare needs.
Yeah. So
We
it should be communities.
Yeah, I think it needs to be communities, because when we look too at our meetings to plan 101 school, don't think about daycare for us. We don't need daycare, but we want a space to do early learning programs. We would like more early learning programs. So there's different flavors within our own district, and I don't think that goal, the way it's stated, reflects that.
It will be changed to communities.
Now, this is just maybe an actual question. It's not a big number or anything. This is just my own curiosity. Under Objective 3.2, to increase the integration of numeracy with applied design skills and technology. And then there's some, I guess, called alignment of resource allocations, whatever. Now, if I were to look on the budget or your financial snapshot, where would that for TTOC days, supplies, welding camp for 16 students, where would that money show up in a financial statement?
Sorry, Moore's, which number are you?
It's I think on page 16.
But essentially, the question is around any of the resources that we list here, where they come from.
Where do they show up afterwards on a snap?
So some of it is just staffing.
Yes,
In
I
fact-
agree with that. I figured that's salary.
90% of it here,
Will be
when
under
you see
salaries.
under alignment of resource allocations with goals, and it lists like the FTE of teachers or the transition coaches, all that staffing that shows up in staffing.
But some of our numeracy and literacy supports were
That
coming
comes
out
from
of the
surplus.
allocated
Yeah,
surplus.
yeah. And so what I'm saying, Helen, is there's a number of sources, including for the welding camp, sometimes that's completely covered by industry. It's just to show the value of and what those resources are that come from a number of different pots.
So it might not necessarily even show up.
That's right.
You wouldn't see them specifically. 'cause
No,
we
I know.
Roll up the
They would be
projects to
somewhere.
one number. Yeah, you get
It's a
one
great question.
number and we have different projects with the same GLs, but we have supplies, services, but you get one number and we get.
Yeah.
So.
Well, thanks for the question.
The other thing I think that's hard a little bit, probably if I thought about it long enough, might come up with better language, is we have negative gaps and positive gaps.
Yes.
Well, a positive gap is a good thing because it's smaller, and a negative gap is bigger. I'm not really sure in the public-facing document that the concept of a positive gap and a negative gap are going to be understood, and there might be a clarity of wording around that.
And just to remind trustees, this is kind of our living document as well, and so we're happy to make those changes as we go, and it's sort of the gist of the overall direction that we're looking for your approval.
Could I please have someone make the motion that the Board of Education adopt the 2023-2024 framework for enhanced student? Moved by Thomas, seconded by Madeline. Right. Early learning environmental scale.
It's for your information, and if there's any questions.
This is where that concept, after looking at the communities, really comes up, because at this point, and I mean, obviously Fort St. John is bulk of our students, it is a starting point, but when you look at all the different programs. We have some in Taylor, we have some here, we have some there, so that's where that community stuff for me. And we have that inquiry project funding that we get to use.
And we'll bring that back once we actually have, next steps on it.
Questions? Ministry of Education, mandate update. The ministry's big rock. Was there any new or exciting news that you want?
No big program announcements or changes for the coming year. Just a reiteration of the basically intellectual, social, and career focus for the goals, as well as the childcare. There was more information last year around the childcare, and so not much this year.
I found the tech services for equity and access an interesting section because people are looking for funding in the annual facilities grant for technology requests that the BCSTA is following up on. And there really isn't anything in that modernization part that dealt with the concept of improved connectivity for our rural areas. All right, leadership advanced planning. Any questions related to what our district leadership team?
You have people signing up? You have people signing up?
Oh, so, yeah, this is the academy. Yes, so the deadline, I believe, is October the 6th, another 2 weeks or so, for sure. And we've already got half a dozen on the list, and we'll take a cohort of 15. I've asked them to prepare an application around rationale, some of the previous experience, and our school leadership as well is drumming up interest. No, we're gonna run it, even with half a dozen, we'll run it.
Is there like a certain amount of shoulder tapping involved, or?
It's both. I made sure that this was broadcast to every teacher, and so everyone has the opportunity to apply. And in addition to that, our school leaders are having conversations, especially with some of our natural teachers are leading in all kinds of ways already. It's going to them and encouraging them to apply. We are anticipating a number of retirements over the next 2 to 3 years.
Audit Pro D update, and this goes back to old business. We did say that at the end of the year in June, we wanted a revisit of the follow-up on that and how it flowed through. So we need to diarize that for our June agenda.
Yeah.
Okay.
So which agenda?
Pardon?
When do we want it? Sorry.
We wanted,
In the spring.
in the spring, we
Great.
wanted an overall,
Yeah, make sure that we cover that.
yeah. But we didn't say what,
What day? Okay.
and I just want to make sure we don't lose sight of that to put it
Absolutely.
on an agenda.
Yeah, whatever format that ends up taking, we have diarized to come back to the board
Okay.
in some fashion around the follow-up to the previous report.
Right. So, can I have a mover and seconder for all aspects of Stephen's report that we will not be pulling individual motions out?
Which one are we pulling?
Pardon?
Which ones were we pulling?
2, 8, 9, 10.
And yeah, 2, 8, 9, and 10 we'll pull different motions out for, but it's everything but 2, 8, 9, and 10.
I'll move it.
Thanks, Nicole, seconded by Ida. Now we'll look at number 2. Could I please have someone make the motion that the Board of Education, calling the question, all in favor? Thank you. Could I please have somebody make the motion that the Board of Education adopt the 2023-2024 framework for enhancing student learning? Moved by David, seconded by Thomas. Calling the question, all in favor? All right. We haven't looked at out-of-district field trips, which is attached in any great depth. But as you take a look at that list of out-of-district field trips, you'll need a mover and seconder for that. And then So can I get a mover and seconder for the out of district field trips? Moved by Nicole, seconded by Thomas. Questions related to the information that's presented for you at this point in time on out of district sports and field trips? Figured there'd have to be some catch-up because some of the volleyball tournaments and things have already happened.
He's got the extra one.
And there's an extra one for Bert Rose. Now, that was for coaches or was that for?
Field trips.
Field trips and coaches, okay, yeah, and there was an additional one for Bert Rose. But somewhere in the message, a piece of paper in front of me, I've lost that one. Thank you. So for Bert Rose, we have a trip, grade 9 boys and girls volleyball that took place September 22nd, 23rd. Grade 8 and 9 boys and girls volleyball teams, October 27th, 28th to Chetwynd, and grade 9 volleyball to Prince George, November 10th, 29th. Have a mover and a seconder. If there are any questions for Stephen related to those, Bill. Oh, Bill?
No.
Okay, calling the question then, all in favor? And moving on to the community coaches.
And we did provide the sport.
Yes,
Yes. This is getting there. This is getting there. No, the first part looks really good. I think there's only a couple of schools. But the other thing is, correct me if I'm wrong, but this way it used to be, most of these people at the high school are not teachers there.
Correct.
And they all need a teacher sponsor, or they can't operate without one. We have to.
so you're asking who the teacher sponsors are.
I don't know, are you asking for it?
Or do, no,
We can,
yeah.
we can, but every.
As long as we know who these are, because they all have to be put in and approved because they're not part of our staff.
Correct.
Yeah.
Because we don't normally necessarily bring a list of all of our in-house or
No.
staff coaches.
We just make sure our administrators are making sure that there's one, they're all.
Yes,
So
correct.
you're wanting the assurance that
Yeah.
there's teacher sponsors.
Yes.
Is there, if I'm correct, they're even supposed to be there for all practices. I think, yeah.
I can double check on that, Bill, but right now the process is to get
Yeah.
non-staff members approved by the board.
Oh, yeah,
in order to
that's great.
coach. Yeah.
This is, I mean, if we had this breakdown for like Bose and Kearney and that'd be sweet. Other than that, that's.
These are the only community coaches that have been submitted to us at this
We
point.
have one for Bert Bose that's in
Yeah.
addition to the
Yeah.
agenda, and that is Christy Erickson, and she coached there last year, and she'd like to coach us again in December.
Much better than before.
So I don't know if we should move this first and then ask the questions, or how you want to do it, but I have a question about this. So Bill's referring to like the fact that there needs to be somebody on staff at practices or there. And I would like some clarification around, is that a board policy?
Board policy.
Okay,
Can
so-
I just throw in though, Nicole, to your question, which we can bring back more details, but a community coach, for example, at Hudson's Hope can be coaching and the principal can be on site, like for a practice, and there is supervision there. by
In
by
his
school-
office
by
doing
a
principal
school
work.
Staff member. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're standing in the gym while the coach is coaching. When you go on trips, absolutely you need to have a sponsored teacher or a staff member with them.
So, and a trustee counts or not?
I would say.
Can we get back to you on that?
Yes, so I'm just wondering, so of course, Hudson's Hope is facing many challenges, as I keep saying, but coaching is one of them. So as you know, it's hard enough to find teachers, and then you ask them to volunteer their time for all these school sports. So, and I'm starting to see just school sports are, I think, extremely important for students. There are students who will not do any extracurriculars due to funding or parenting or home situations except for school sports, and they're dwindling. And part of it is, well, and then when you can't find coaches, they just don't happen. Principals are just trying to find teachers, let alone coaches. That's where Derek's at. So we are facing 0 volleyball coaches for 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We have a senior, that's it. So when you make it have to be a school, I'm just wondering if it's time to like, there are some really good community people. I just wonder what that rule's about, having to have somebody from the school involved.
Other than Thomas?
I'm just gonna go refer to you about a trustee.
Mhm.
I've been a community coach at the Taylor School for a couple of their different ones over the years, being a trustee. And what I had to do at that time is do exactly the same as here. I had to be approved by the board, and then I just had to say I had a conflict of interest and not vote on it. But I had to do everything the same as the community coach. I had to make sure I had my criminal check. I had to make sure, and we did have to have a sponsor, a school sponsor.
So you didn't count as a school sponsor, being a trustee?
I didn't trust.
That was your
No.
question.
That was
Would
my
a
question.
trustee be the
Yeah,
school
no.
sponsor?
And some of that may actually go back to BC school sports rules as well as board policy that came out of the BC School Sports Association.
What I'm hearing Trustee Gillis also perhaps suggest is we have a fairly full slate for the first couple of policy meetings.
Yep.
I think it would be a great idea if I could recommend, based on your question, to do a review
Yeah.
of that, and that's a good opportunity as a policy committee with all of you to take a look at that.
And Stephen, just to add to that, we have to remember, as trustees, we're not employees of the school. No. So that's where
Oh,
it
okay.
comes into,
I'm gonna say, isn't,
We are representatives of the.
I don't see her name here. Isn't Alex coaching one of the school teams?
I'm not sure, I can ask, and maybe they haven't put it in yet, I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's time to visit it. Again, I don't know what other schools are facing, but we're facing a real shortage. So if I could have been a school representative as a trustee, I would help, because there's parents who can do some practices, but it's the way tournaments and stuff that, we're just not getting we're not getting the school staff wanting to do it. So we are going to have no volleyball.
I just wanted to confirm about the, and it was already confirmed, about the criminal record check.
Right. We did the discussion that should come after a mover and seconder. So I have a mover and seconder to approve the community coaches as presented. Nicole and David. Calling the question because we've had the discussion. All in favor? All right.
So that's coming to a policy meeting.
I'm saying it could.
Do I need to make a motion for it too?
No, we can just, through the chair, we can add agenda items to the policy committee. It's just that for the purposes of this report and this meeting tonight,
Yeah.
we have to stick with the procedures that we have.
Stephen, can I suggest that it doesn't come to the policy, just comes to the community, our committee date? Because I think that there's some other issues other than just a policy.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So can we just have the item, and then it can go
Oh,
to
that's a good
policy
idea.
after?
Yeah. Okay.
Could I please have a mover and seconder related to the posts of responsibility as presented? And there was one additional one for Bert Lowe's. Moved by Ida, seconded by Thomas. Discussion? No discussion, then I'll call the question. All in favor? Thank you very much. That concludes Stephen's.
Sorry, did the community coaches one get voted on?
Yes. Yeah.
Sorry, thanks.
Is the out of district, Leah?
Yeah.
Okay.
They all
Great, thank you, sorry,
carry the
Helen.
question.
And apologies for the length.
No, lots of stuff needing to get done. All right, So I think we've concluded Stephen's part of the report, and we'll move on to Angela's.
So we'll start with the finance update to August 31st, 2023. The food security grant, we received a grant called Feeding Futures this year. Sorry, my computer might sleep. We received roughly $806,000 that can be used towards manager of food services. It can be used for staffing and for purchases of small equipment to upgrade kitchens and schools, as well as the food. So those are what we're currently working on. We've allotted $50 per student out to schools right now. And we still have additional funds to allocate, and we're just sorting out the staffing piece. 101 school upgrade announcement. So a celebration there after my predecessor's hard work and the board's hard work. We've been approved for, says a partial replacement of 101 Elementary, which is everything but the gym is being replaced. So that's a good news story there. We're starting to work on that. And Upper Halfway, I have some pictures if we want to throw them up. I just pulled them up now, sorry, surprise. So I'm going to bump you, Stephen.
While we're talking about 101, did they come up with an idea, a plan? I was out there last weekend. Walk around.
Have we come up with a
Is there a rough plan on where they're going to do that? Where the-
Concept plan that got submitted.
Yeah, so that's where the okay, so where the skating rink would be up that way. Okay.
And we can come back to that too.
magic here? So this is the gym on the far side and the school ahead of it, so.
There's upgrades to the sidewalk already around there, right?
Sorry, there's more. I'm just
Let's
technologically
make it look
challenged.
big.
It makes this, yeah, from that angle it does. Here's the front entryway. Lots of dirt. They've been living with a lot of dirt around there. This is just the interior. It's not quite finished. They expect to have it finished at the end of October is the goal. There's the exterior with everyone's favorite windows. We strategically placed this so hopefully they don't blind anyone during a pivotal basketball game.
It's unusual to have windows in a gym.
Seems to be, they actually want to double that for windows. We've only have them on
But
one
it's unusual though,
side.
isn't it?
Well, North Peace does.
The normal.
If you look at Mom Marie and Ann Roberts.
Okay.
They all
usually-
have windows.
I would have always, yeah, it's newer.
Any chance they're
one
gonna
has?
get broken?
Well,
Probably not up there, but they actually wanted more than that. They wanted double that, but we
Okay.
won that battle. And this is just showing the cross piece that connects the school to the gymnasium, and that'll all be enclosed once it's up and running, so. And I don't know what that is, so please ignore it. Shouldn't allow me to work with technology. Okay.
And the human resources report.
Yeah, and then there's the support staff summary up and from June to middle of June to September 14th. Covers quite a large period there. Yeah, and that is my report.
I have a mover and seconder for Angela's report. And then we'll get to do discussion. Moved by Nicole, seconded by Thomas. Ida, I'm not looking your way, so jump up and down and. All right, finance update to August 31st. Questions?
Well,
Not a lot of
I was
activity.
just gonna say,
up
hate
to
to
this
say
point.
so, but I don't think there's much to pull out of that one.
And it's probably too early to ask, but are we feeling that our September enrollment is going to come in the window that we wanted to for our budget?
Yeah, so far what we've seen, so the budget was based on 6,010 FTE for brick and mortar schools, and we are seeing those numbers materialize.
Nicole,
This is on number 2, if we're done with number 1.
are we done with number 1? Any other questions? All right, on to number 2.
So the food security grant,
Mhm.
what was the grant called that ended last year that was providing?
Affordability fund?
Okay, so when a lot of the principals and stuff came and talked to us about their food programs throughout they remember they were like, well, and with the affordability fund ending, we don't know how next year's gonna look. But we kind of knew that this food thing was coming, but anyways, is it the same? Like, is it the same amount or are schools cutting back?
We've actually received more than I think the affordability fund was around 680-ish, and this is at 806. And there is differences between the two. This is food focused. The affordability fund could be used for fees and could be used for clothing and different things. This is focusing on food in schools for students. And there's a
So it's a
staffing.
tighter parameter for, because the affordability principals were able to kind of move.
And this one also has a food coordinator position. We can hire for that so that they can help schools with meal planning, procurement, as well as the affordability fund wouldn't allow for new program funding for staff. Whereas this one, we can pay for additional staffing for in-school meals.
We have had a meals coordinator through community links for schools that qualify for that, inner city schools, haven't we?
Not for years. I used to look after community links, and so this would be about 8 or 9 years ago. We moved away from a contract, a good question though, to on-site school planning,
Okay.
and with the means to do it. But the good news about this food security fund is that actually it's going to cover the in-school staffing portion as well as the cost of the food and a coordinator.
And
So it's also a good news story then.
It's a very good news story.
People are happy.
Yes.
Okay.
So is that what we're considering is, because a lot of times this stuff has been done off the side of the desk, that we're now,
Well, we're hoping to allocate more time to the meals people already within the schools. And then the coordinator can assist them with recipes or centralized purchases. And we're still trying to figure out what that role looks like. And we met with the admins. And they provided us with some great feedback. So it's a growing year and learning year. So it's lots of schools have great programs that are already up and running.
Will this person also be looking for, I don't want to say donations, but community giving, where, things like grocery stores that want to give back into the school district, would they be the ones to go start that conversation?
What we're trying to do, it's a good question, is generally speaking, and certainly for PACs and things like that, is you try not to double dip where programs are funded by the Ministry of Education. And so when industry has been phoning in, as they do every year, because they're very generous, we're starting to redirect them, as are the school leaders, towards other much needed projects. Whether it's Camp Cameron, band, Project Heavy Duty, sports equipment, whatever it is, because we feel like we have more than enough funds now for the food. And so we want to redirect that interest towards other much needed programming, if that makes sense.
The other thing, when this funding was first announced, the concept was that it was going to be linked to using BC agricultural products. I haven't seen or read anything about how that's going to be happening. Is that kind of in the works in terms of planning?
That is, we're learning about that, and I'm hoping our food coordinator will be very engaged with that. They've done a few presentations now, but I've saved the material for her or him when they hire someone to pass something to review.
And to follow through with your point, Helen, on the part of the requirement of where possible, considering local food sources and things like that.
Yeah, I was gonna ask the same question that Nicole did about the funding we had last year, but it's probably fair to say that that funding that we got last year, a lot of it was used to feed the students, and so this is just going to help with that as well.
Yeah, there was actually quite a bit that went to things like fees and supplies and jackets,
Really?
boots.
Yeah.
Sometimes medical apparatus. It was quite a while, which is great. So for a year, the school system was used in BC to try and support families in a much more extended way. I'm glad you asked the question though, because this food security fund is for students in school. So whereas we were actually engaging quite a bit with either grocery support or gift cards or even individual families needing support in a number of different ways, that is not this fund.
David?
Through the organizations that I work with, I've been raising money for school lunches and things like that. Should we just kind of keep that going, but steer it towards Cape Cameron, or?
If you don't mind redirecting them to me,
Yeah,
just
I will.
because
I will.
I've started to come up with like an MOU or sort of guiding criteria to help industry and companies so that we don't have to piecemeal this from 15 different organizations and redirect them towards these projects that we can talk about. Band, Camp Cameron, please.
Just one more question. How many years have they said this fund is good going for?
They've committed for a 3-year term because that's their budget cycle, but they have said it will be ongoing. So it shouldn't go away.
One-on-one school upgrade announcement. Because it came to me as correspondence, included the letter from the minister. And yes, Angela knew, and I had to sign a contract earlier, but we were sworn to secrecy. We could not say anything to anybody until the minister made.
I bet it was scary.
Made their, yeah, big
that out.
Oh,
announcement.
that's what that signals were across.
Yeah.
Got it.
I would ask you to treat this approval as confidential, and so I did. But it was hard, because it's exciting. Upper halfway update. So I think I heard you say it's not going to be ready until the end of October. Does the ministry have any expectations around an opening ceremony for that gym? I know that they do on new builds, and they can be kind of prescriptive in who needs to talk, the order that needs to be done. But if we are going to have some kind of opening for it, the sooner everybody gets it on the calendar and worked out. I just don't know what the expectations are for.
Will there be a dedication?
Yeah.
So it'd be good to find out.
And if not, does our district do one?
Just have to understand the ministry process beats ours sometimes.
Yeah.
Right, any questions related to Angela's HR report?
Please. So again, like on the website here, if I look at that, I'm going, whoa, there's a lot of job openings. Is there,
There are a lot of job openings.
yeah. Are we not getting people applying, or?
We do get people applying, but we're filling the positions as fast as we can, and we get some applicants. Some positions we get 30 applicants, some we get none. So we're doing the best we can. It is the way it is. You are reading it correctly.
A full page of postings.
But also, the schools are just gathering their needs, so the majority of those are educational assistant courses.
Yeah.
So they're just finding out what their schools need, trying to allocate their funds. So most of those are likely newer postings. I haven't heard any alarms yet that they aren't able to find people. We're not at that point. We're just 2 weeks in, so some of the postings are new. do better than.
Paul?
It is what it is.
So I'm trying to decide if I maybe should have asked to add this to new business or if this would fall under her personnel report. Just looking for an update from my meeting in Hudson's Hope about the before and after school care.
Just the before and after school care, or?
Yeah, because that's where we left off, is Tracy thought that the school district could help immediately if she could get the Strong Start girl to do before and after school care, which would fill a need.
Okay.
So I'm just wondering if anything's come to fruition there?
I haven't heard anything to that end. I can keep you updated. I do have a meeting tomorrow.
Okay.
Around the situation in Hudson Hope.
Okay.
So, maybe you can follow up after that.
Okay, but when we did that scan, that was the time that might have been. I
That's
did
okay, but we-
give you
we-
that.
Oh, did you give me that look?
Yeah, I gave you
I don't know your look, because sometimes there's top secret look. Okay, sorry.
We've been working together way too long.
But we're having a meeting tomorrow with,
Okay.
the people from the community there, as well as Tracy and myself.
Again, Helen, just to sort of temper some expectations, like, we're gonna do what we can. We've actually been pretty pleased with what they've been able to do on school site there, just with the Strong Starter, the early learning piece. But there are many other responsible organizations, including the community of Hudson's Hope and
Right.
things like that. So SD60 will not be able to fix this.
No.
I don't think that's what you're saying.
No,
or expecting,
Tracy
but-
just thought that if she could get the girl who does Strong Start, which
Yeah.
thankfully we hired,
Yes.
but also if she wanted extra hours, do before and after school care in the Strong Start room.
Yeah.
Out of the 18 families who have no childcare right now, 11 of them would be helped with just the before and
There you
after
go.
school care.
So that's the piece we'll follow up on.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. No further questions. Calling the question, all in favor? Thank you.
Thank you.
You got up late.
Well, after the 2-pager, Stephen, I didn't know what to do with myself.
All right. Moving on to item number 10, reports of the regular committee of the whole meeting, June 5th, pages 19 and 20 in the agenda package. Could I get a mover and seconder, please? Moved by Bill, seconded by Madeline. Looking for errors or omissions. On the question then, all in favor? Thank you. Business arising from the minutes. How much delay do you think actually came from wildfires on the pathway?
Delay, I would say, I know we were shut down for 2 weeks, back in end of May there, beginning of June. Other delays were just with contractors, coming out, and not all of the pieces were there, and they would come back next time, so.
Well, I'm hoping we learned some things on Upper Halfway Gym that will smooth it because of the travel and all of those kinds of things. So hopefully that's being captured somewhere. Any other discussion points related to?
The fencing is at Cole Central, looks great. Thanks to your team for putting that in. There was a mention, I don't know if this is the time to mention it, or just Pat. The only real opening on the south side is really in the parking lot. There was a concern that that's an unsafe place for kids to be around, with traffic going in and out all the time. A walkway or something like that might be a decent idea.
We can take that back now.
All right. Calling the question then, all in favor? This is surprising, we did, actually, I might have called the question twice on that one. Policy Committee. So we have motions to come forward from Policy Committee. They were out for notice of motion, so we had a mover. We're now looking for somebody to second, and then we'll look at carrying those. So Policy 4024, Teachers Early Retirement Incentive Payout. Our first policy. Did I get a seconder for that policy? Thomas, you approved it, so we can't have it. Bill? Any further discussion before I call the question? All right. All in favor? Policy 1002, Communications and Community Engagement. The mover was David. Can I get a seconder for that, please? Seconded by Nicole. We learned from our Rick Price that the following, the word now, rather than empower, is refer, deference. Yeah. All right, calling the question then, all in favor? Right, policy 4027, teachers leaves, the initial mover was Madeline. So we're looking for that policy be adopted, moved by Thomas, or seconded by Thomas. All in favor? Other reports, item number 11 on our agenda, UCSTA, we'll start with Trustee Gillis.
Well, you added something here, I see, because you work on that committee, right?
Yeah, but what was provincial council?
Right, provincial council, I guess for emergent motions, we have a deadline of September 20th if we want to try to get them in. That gives me, that's 2 days. So I can't think of any.
Well, I couldn't think of anything, but I wanted us to understand, emergent motions can be made through provincial council, and an emergent motion is for something that can't wait to be dealt with till AGM.
See, time sensitive.
Because it's time sensitive, yeah. I couldn't think of any, but there's 6 other bodies in this room. The paperwork part's not that hard, it's the intent needs to be recorded in a set of minutes.
So here's a question. So if we had one that we said we can't possibly wait till April to get for the AGM, right? 'Cause
Yeah.
What would then happen at the provincial council meeting that he's attending, right? It's going to come up and then provincial council is going to say yes or no to it?
Yes, it goes to a vote of provincial council. What ends up happening is any motion that's made will go before the legislative committee, and the legislative committee will decide whether it's emergent or it can wait.
Oh, okay.
So, for example, last year Maple Ridge had made a motion related to inflationary pressures, and I think that one went forward, but there was another one that somebody had put forward and they said, no, that can wait till AGM.
Okay.
So goes to Ledge Committee, and if Ledge Committee says yes, it goes to Provincial Council.
And then provincial council
Yeah,
does it?
Yeah.
Or says yes or no to it? Okay.
So would something like the situation in Hudson's Hope with the childcare and that, would that be?
No, because it's like to the BCSTA, you're saying to the executive, do this, right?
it is.
So like, they've already, yeah.
Childcare is already identified as an issue. And then you also have to remember that you need to, how are you going to help me when I stumble here? I believe you can't make a motion about something that's been made in the previous 2
Yeah.
years.
And it has to be something that, to go to provincial council, it has to be an item that can't wait. So, it would have to be emergent, that it would affect it if we waited until the
Right.
AGM.
Yeah. So anyway, I can't think of anything, Helen can't think of anything. If anybody thinks of anything, we have till Wednesday. That's all, yeah, and then, no other update except for I'm unable to attend the meeting, provincial council meeting in October, so Bill is going on our behalf.
Thanks, Nicole. The long-awaited climate change working group report came out in June. It was submitted in July, and I did ask, why did it take so long? Apparently, some of the things in it, the ministry wanted some time to respond to and think about, and I had no idea that report went to both your BCSD directors, they shared with the ministry, and then eventually it came back. It seemed to me to be a little, but it is out. I want to thank Angela and Chad for providing me with some of the information. I will tell you that if you've looked at it, it suggests we don't have an environmental policy, and we do, but I tried to change that 3 times with the person that did that section, and it never got changed. Is it a policy that we're incredibly active on and meeting all of the things that we said we wanted to do in the policy that we passed? Probably not. It might be an area that if we're going to look at policy, that we need to do some follow-up on.
What was the mandate of the working group? Like what was this report?
There was an incredible length of terms of reference for it, and one of the things that happened with it was the terms of reference were so large, it was very difficult to narrow it to come up with what they wanted. And my understanding is that the actual report will be followed up in much more detail at Academy this time, because as part of the recommendations of the report, we had graduates from UBC doing 2 capstone projects that looked at some of the climate upgrades to schools for deferred maintenance related to climate change, and they were looking at some of the actual costs that would be associated with districts meeting the climate change goal set for 2023. And there's a range of intensity around the province on boards on the importance of this. A lot of boards not only have an environmental policy, they have a sustainability policy, but they also have whole departments that are using that. And I kept saying, we don't all have that scale of economy, but the climate change working group will continue again next year and start to do some things. Their terms of reference will be updated to continue to do some of the work from this committee. And environmental changes and climate change have been a real, if you go back and look at the motions database, have been really important to Kootenays. And the person that's going to be the chair for this working group comes out of Kootenays. So there's a desire on the part of some members of the BCSD to move this group forward. So we'll see what happens with it. Thomas.
Just to clarify, if we addressed some of the issues in this climate change plan, that would potentially decrease the amount that's clawed back at the end of the year from the government for our climate change non-action, as they put it, or whatever that line item was, where we had to pay an exorbitant amount back to the
carbon
government.
neutral program.
Exactly,
tax,
yeah.
Yeah.
So it's either we spend it on doing this stuff, or we just continue to get it taken away from the provincial government anyway.
There's costs associated with it. So it certainly is a starting point for discussion, and then we'll see what the new group, well, some of the old group, but some of the new members. I realized in some of my conversations with Carolyn Brody, I'm actually quite surprised that we have 2 members of trustees on working groups or network groups, because they really try and look at their 60 school districts. If there's interest around the province, they try and make sure that it's all spread out. So the fact that we have 2 trustees on groups for the BCSTA is a nod to us in a sense. So it's there, and just a reminder that the BCSTA is continuing with virtual orientations And the dates are there for registering for the next two. But all of the past ones, and Rick Price referenced some of the past ones, are available on, I think it's still the hub, and you might have noticed if you've been in, the hub is changing to the portal. So some things are on the portal, some things are on the hub. So you may find that until eventually everything from the hub will be changed over to the portal. That's a work in progress, so you might find two places. BCPC.
Not much to say. Tom and Bill will attend the symposium. I figured that two of us go and they're gonna bring back a great report. We should,
And we'll just reiterate the BCPC, it's really important to bring the information back because they're not nearly as good at the BCSDA about giving information
posting
back.
slides and stuff.
And Nicole and I can attest to the fact that last year we took notes, but they said, oh, this will be coming. So we went, well, we're gonna wait till we see what comes and then we know what we'll bring back to the board, and we waited, and we waited, and we waited.
Okay, I'm really good at taking pictures.
It didn't ever come. So just that proviso. And board Pro D committee, at this point, there isn't anything to report because most of our Pro D at this point will probably end up being around strategic engagement, and we'll be putting a lot of energy into that. Moving on to correspondence, I'll let Angela speak to the maps that we had trouble figuring out.
Sorry, I wanted to get a candy.
How is it?
Very good.
Excellent.
Thank you, Helen. We received, the Board of Education of School District 60 received a zoning amended bylaw. They're trying to amend the institutional zone permitted uses in Fort St. John. So periodically we receive these bylaws and they're telling us to come to a meeting and they're going to go through the changes. So if we are opposed, we would go to, I guess, the public hearing and we would hear what they have to say. What we're suggesting, and we also received this information after June 26th, so we didn't have an opportunity to go to the public hearing, but they're just looking for more flexibility in what can go into the INS-I institutional zone. And they're trying to create more flexibility to assist in meeting the current and future housing needs of residents in Fort St. John, and specifically addressing the needs of seniors, people with disabilities, and Indigenous people. So that was.
So the letter came on Friday, June 23rd, and the meeting was on Monday, June 26th. And I have to say, Angela and I looked at it and we were still trying to figure out what they were saying on the map, and I couldn't go. So.
Those must be our schools.
No, they're institutions.
They're institutions like the hospitals there, like an institution, assisted living, independent living for seniors.
Okay, so maybe one is.
Senior care, they're not schools. That's what we tried to figure out initially. We're like, these aren't our schools, but then sometimes I think it's a test.
So are they trying to suggest to us where we should put a school?
No, not at all. Not at all. This is strictly just a bylaw change that they brought to the board, so it in turn comes to the meeting. It's strictly around institutional zoning, and I think they're just trying to generate some flexibility around that.
Yeah, well, that's possible now.
Right, so moving on to agenda item number 13, unfinished business. I've provided you with an advocacy update. The K-12 education and child care pages are from the Financial Standing Committee presentation that we worked on as a group, and then I went and talked to them. We are mentioned in here a couple of times with regards to shared that supply and delivery costs to bring items to the north have increased above inflation levels. We did speak to recruitment and retention, but that was your comments in there. You can see the recommendation that came out of it. Some of them I can see exactly where they came from in the presentations. Some of them I'm not totally sure about. So, but those are there. And the other thing that I did was I just did a little report for you on advocacy follow-up from the AGM related to our motions and the NIB motions to let you know where they're standing and what has happened with them. I included the NIB ones because we as a board worked on those. Some of us did some of the work on that. And I know that when it says ongoing work with the Workforce Committee for Northern Interior Branch online teacher programs we put forward and interprovincial and international certification, it's certainly there. And having the motion on record from our district regarding Northern assessment wait time will be something that Bill can bring forward in his committee. All good things. School trustee codes of conduct. What I've done is it is attached there. Remember, I kept saying the ministry was going to get back to us after looking at everything. And they've come back to us, and we knew this already, that there are some aspects of our trustee codes of conduct we don't really have the pieces in. And so I do have reference documents and templates and things that I'll bring forward to policy committee, but it is a piece of work that we will have to work on. Strategic plan update. I'm going to send this out to you. It was supposed to be, it got missed as an attachment, but this is the BCSTA's newest document, and it includes elements that we should be thinking about with regards to strategic planning, student planning. Lots of live links to some of the documents we may want to refer to. The strategic planning committee, organizing committee now has met with Urban Matters, and we're at the stage where we hope by the end of the month we'll start to see some documentation and flyers and things that we can get out in schools. I know one of the things that we had talked about was bringing student voice in, and through our strategic plan, that is a natural place for student voice. They are in the process of preparing an engagement kit, and with that engagement kit, we as trustees will be able to go out and do some of the work in terms of information gathering with stakeholders groups and rights holders groups. If you, in your past involvement with strategic planning, have any really good core capture questions to put out, we would love to have those. I am going to go on to the board chair site and ask if anybody has recently undergone strategic planning, if they would be willing to share survey questions and survey items so that we can see what else has gone on. And I think our next planning committee meeting is 27th. And Urban Matters is supposed to come back to us with some things at that point.
So no date set for us all to meet yet,
Not yet.
but that will be
Hopefully-
above and beyond committee whole meet. board
Yes,
meeting.
yeah,
Okay.
and that's why I wanted to sort of see where we got to before we have our next committee of the whole day, when we look at what we're all going to do for the year, because strategic planning, the more obviously engagement activities we put out there that the board is going to be directly involved in, we've only, as a board, gotten sort of so much time and energy, or to quote somebody else, time is a resource, and we have to pay attention to our resource and where we're at. So I think we'll know a little bit more for the committee of the whole meeting after we have that planning meeting. The message was we'd like to see the engagement kit earlier rather than later, because that will help us decide how we're going to do. I know one of the things that perhaps changed a little bit when we met was the concept that we would like to include grade 6 students in this process. Originally, the plan that we talked about was only middle school and high school, but if we're doing a 5-year strategic plan, those grade 6s are 5 years in the system. And then the other thing is engaging the grade 6s within the elementary school may bring more buy-in from both staff and parents. Looking to create a number of in-person opportunities as well as online opportunities. I think there's any other new business. We'll move on to item number 15, and Michelle.
Hey, thank you. It's good to be back. Been a busy couple weeks. Just want you to know that we have a new vice president of the PRNTA. It's Josie Goche. She's a teacher at Robert Holby School. And Mary didn't run this year, so we had an election and all good. I'm wondering if I can ask a question about the board policy around the early retirement incentive.
Yeah.
So I noticed that the letter that Sharon Shell sends out every year, which is great, that is struck. And so how will teachers know about the early retirement incentive plan and timelines and everything? Is it kind of like at any time, like can somebody decide to retire in June and then they would be eligible for this? Because right now they wouldn't.
Trying to pull it up, sorry.
It's okay.
The timeline was struck just because we weren't following the timeline that was in the policy.
Okay, like the April 5th or.
Yeah, because it didn't always work. Like sometimes there was spring break, sometimes, and I'm just trying to buy time so I can pull it. Why don't I pull it up on the website? That would probably be.
There will still be a letter.
There's still, the process will still be the same.
Well, because it's struck though. Or is it going to be a different
But
letter?
the date, yeah, it'll be different.
It'll be a
Is that right,
different.
Angela?
Yeah, because the letter that was struck indicated everything had to be returned by April 5th.
Because we accommodate past that date.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
I just don't know. Teachers won't know about this if it doesn't come out. I'm just serious. People that are turned 55,
We're not changing that, definitely sending out the information. We're actually broadening or adjusting the timelines that we weren't respecting or following anyway.
Okay.
And the reason the letter struck is just because it's just a policy, so we didn't need to have the procedural letter involved there.
Okay.
The process will continue.
Okay. Because then I thought, is that one more thing that I have to
No.
do is to let them know? I was like, I was going to
It's
just
just
like,
the date wasn't being, like April 5th wasn't being followed, so we just took the date.
okay, perfect. Okay. When I just saw it struck, I just was like, I don't know how teachers are going to even know about this then.
In addition to why it's struck, like many other policies that you'll see where some of the procedural stuff is struck, is just because we're just separating now when we can or as we get to the policy versus then admin procedures.
Okay.
The policy will just be policy alone, and then the procedures are something different. But the information will be sent out.
Got it. Because I did see that with the teacher leaves. I was like, okay, everything is pretty much in there still. I think it was
Yes.
still the same different format
Yeah.
and all of that.
We're actually just trying to stay true to what policy is versus the admin procedures that support them.
So I have one more thing. It's kind of personal to me. And my son moved to Malaysia in January, and he works for a research publishing company in Singapore. And he published an article it's called Supercomputing Asia. And I'm wondering if I can send it to Stephen and Helen and then to send it out. It's all on AI and education. It's like super interesting as to what's happening in China, in Singapore, in Australia. I think, Tom, you're going to really find it
Right
very
up my
interesting,
alley.
because, right up your alley. So I'll just send it, and then if you wouldn't mind sending it to the trustees, or should I send it to Leah to send out?
Yeah, just send it to Leah. She can
Send it
send
to
it
Leah,
out.
and then you can send it out, Leah? It's just a link to the website.
Will
What's
do.
your son's like background? Oh, he has a PhD in biochem from McGill. Oh. And so he did his research on autism. And so it was a great opportunity for him to work and, you know, have income when he's in Malaysia. But his wife works for an international pharmaceutical company that is she's like a marketing manager, and I don't know, it's like she talks about clinical trials and the cost of pharmaceuticals and developing all of these things. So yeah, so I was there in July, and it was
I was gonna say, have you been?
amazing experience. Just saying. So thank you for indulging me. Sorry, that's really not. That's so bad. I'm sorry. I just had to tell you.
Michelle?
Did he go through schooling here in Port St. John?
Yeah, he was
Oh, well, then it's totally relevant. A success story.
He was valedictorian in 2010.
Okay, well.
Right? He met his wife at U of A, and she's Malaysian, and yeah.
Great musician
Great
and
musician.
athlete.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
It's an interesting time for you to mention that because we were just talking, and I just started a college course today called Digital Transformation Leadership.
You will like these
Oh, I'm
articles. You will. Okay. Yeah, I'll send it to you. Thank you. Sorry about that.
We indulge sometimes. So we don't have Jane here from CUPE, and we don't have Deepak here. So we'll move on to item number 18, questions from the press and public related to agenda items. And if you are going to ask a question, we ask that you give your name so we can capture it properly in the minutes. And yeah, anything from anybody out there?
I'm just wondering if you guys are aware of March on Wednesday? Yeah. Okay. Are you aware that, let me just get my notes. That CUPE Ontario and the Canadian Labour Movement is going to be counter-protesting parents, grandparents, and citizens?
That piece I didn't know.
Might not be here, but in the bigger centers there is, and they're forming a counter-protest against parents.
Thank you for that update. Any other, moving around Stephen's big chair. Any other questions for President Beckles? Okay. All right. All right. So could I please get motion to suspend our regular meeting and move back into in-camera? Bill and David, calling the question on that. All in favor? All right. Leah, may you please stop the recording? And we'll take a break before we move. So Leah, thank you. Can I please have a motion that the in-camera meetings be brought forward for implementation? Moved by Thomas, seconded by Bill. All in favor? Now could I get a motion, please, to adjourn the regular meeting? Moved by Ida, seconded by Nicole again. And calling the question. All in favor? We're done.